Hey, welcome everybody to Beyond the Cart. I'm your host, Kyle Hamer, and today's show, I'm super excited because this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. In fact, I'm prepped. I feel like I'd be smarter because I'm rocking my NASA t-shirt because tonight we are talking about data. And when you talk about data, it's always good to have experts in the field to have that conversation with you. So tonight I welcome my guest, David Finkelstein, CEO, founder of BDEX. David, welcome to the show. I'm super pumped to have you on.
Hey, Kyle. Thank you. Crazy being on your show. I'm used to hosting my own show, so it's different for me being in this chair as a guest, but I'm excited to do it.
Awesome. Well, I had a great time on your show not too long ago, so it's awesome to return the favor and jump on this one. I'm pumped. But give the listeners a little bit of context about your background, how you kind of got started, and then we're going to jump into some fun topics around data.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll try to keep it as short as possible because it can get really long. I've been in the internet space for over 30 years. So I started an internet service provider back in 1994, sold it to a cable company in 2000, helped them deploy internet across their cable systems in 13 states. And then I ended up that's where I sort of started getting into the ad tech world. After that, took my employee number one with me, Michael, and we became partners. And we started a company called ContextuAds, which was an early adopter of contextual advertising. And over the course of 10 years, it became a lot more of a behavioral ad targeting platform, tracking data about people and the websites that they went to and what they clicked on, what they engaged with, and really learning a lot about consumers to target ads about them. And that's what ContextuAds did. And during that time, we really learned that, as the sort of ad tech world evolved, the real value was in the data. That's what led us to build the company we have today, which is BDEX, which originally stood for Big Data Exchange. And it was really all about understanding consumer behaviors, the data behind them. And soon it became very much related to identity data. How do we identify these people? How do we retarget to them? And what can we learn about them? And so that's a lot of what we do today. We're heavily in the identity space. We build and manage one of the largest, most comprehensive identity graphs in the US, and help companies target both in the MarTech and AdTech space with that ID graph, as well as with some tools to build audiences and enrich consumer data.
I love it. So yeah, this is the topic for tonight's conversation, really, is like, how does data get used effectively in an e-commerce, D2C context? And so one of the areas where I think we have a lot of leakage, right, in the D2C space is really in the cart, in the final step of the funnel. Mm-hmm. And you can see this. In fact, I have a client right now, and we're kind of going through this process where we have amazing ad CTRs. We're getting great click-through rate, and we're actually getting really good revenue from those campaigns, but we have a really high add to cart number and a really low comparative purchase rate. Mm-hmm. So, it's like, ideally you would want to be like 50% add to cart to complete the purchase, complete checkout. That would be ideal. 50% or higher, I think, would be like sort of the goal. And like, they were kind of floating around like 20%, in some cases like 18%. So they had a ton of these add to carts. And so like the cart recovery and how you maximize that data, I think is really, really important. So let's jump in. Let's start with that as topic number one. Mm-hmm. And that's abandoned cart. What can we do to sort of increase our performance at that stage of the funnel? Because that's like running the marathon and you're getting close to the finish line, and you just see that finish line and you're like falling down, falling short, just feet away. Like we need to get across that line. So what are some insights on abandoned cart retargeting?
So I love this. So one of the sort of the good news here, right, is that there's a huge number, that's a big percentage of people that you have access to convert. Like there's a lot of upside here. So there's a big opportunity. So it's really about figuring out how do you convert that and get that upside, right? And I think, to me, that's where the data comes in. Like there's understanding, not just it's just why are they not completing the purchase, but who are they, and how do they compare to your existing customers? So I think the data piece of it becomes really important. Understanding all of this information about who these people are can really help you increase that conversion rate, increase that rate of rather than abandoning the cart, getting them to actually complete the cart process, and being able to retarget them, right? So there's a couple of things there. If you don't know who they are, you have to identify them. So now identity comes into place. Once that identity comes into place, and we can maybe use tools to identify them as an anonymous visitor, because they have not actually purchased something from you yet. Once you have that, then we can take that and learn a little more about them, find out who they are from a demographic and psychographic type of perspective, and build on that and compare that to the rest of your customers, and truly understand, are these actual customers? Are these people that were realistically going to purchase? And if so, now we have sort of the tools and the data behind that to retarget them properly. Sometimes that retargeting, one of the most important things about retargeting becomes segmenting, but you can't always segment them unless you have the data about them. So that's where that comes in. The other thing on the identity side is also about maybe they are an existing customer. Maybe there's somebody that bought from you before, but you haven't identified them because, one, they haven't logged in. Maybe you dropped a cookie, but their cookies got reset, or they're coming from a different device. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times it's as easy as re-identifying them and realizing that this is one of your customers, but they are just on a different device. And that essentially makes it even easier to retarget them and get them to convert.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. Like that's part of the challenge, right? It's how do you identifying an identification of that customer in the funnel and where they're coming from, different device. And in mapping that out, I think is an important step in sort of closing that loop and probably getting across the finish line. The other thing too, that I think you said that was really important, is just identifying where they're at in the funnel too, because there's you think about abandoned cart and you think about it being like this, it's an entire holistic, it's my abandoned cart campaigns. But in reality, abandoned cart is different than abandoned checkout. Mm-hmm. And so making that distinction clear in what is really your thinking and process and plans and campaign, like how are you going to kind of close that, and making sure that even you're talking to the right people. Because I've seen people's accounts and they're like, oh, this is my abandoned cart campaign. And I was like, well, technically you're only targeting people who are abandoning checkout. You're not even talking to them once they've added product to the cart yet. And mm-hmm. So it's like, you're totally ignoring them. And that's where the bulk of their data was coming from. So yeah, I mean, I think it's important, A, understanding how your funnel breaks down, and then 2, identifying who they are. Once you've identified them, is there any insights that you've seen with your experience in terms of like best practices of sort of going after and closing that loop once you have this identification process done?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that when you identify if it's an anonymous visitor and they are, you have to sort of look at handling these things differently. They're an anonymous visitor. Once you de-anonymize them, let's just say you have, work with a company that can do that, like ours. Once you de-anonymize them, there's really more than one sort of direction to go into, because if you de-anonymize them and you find that they are an existing customer, you really want to treat that customer very differently than you want to treat somebody that isn't an existing customer, right?
Yeah.
And so another type of segmentation right there, like you have to have two different paths. I think that's extremely important, because there's sort of, sometimes people have sort of this uneasiness when you retarget somebody that didn't identify themselves. And so that can be challenging to tell someone that that they were at your website and this is what they had in their cart when they didn't give you their email address. And it's like all of a sudden this is coming at them. So we often have found that being more subtle in those cases is much better. Retargeting via digital media, really good. That as opposed to email. People get really protective of their email. Like, you don't have the right, people feel like you don't have the right to email me if I didn't give you my email address, right?
Yes.
And so you could really find yourself in a position where you're turning off that customer. The other customer, on the other hand, where once we de-anonymize them and we see that they are one of your existing customers, they're just on a different device. Well, that's your first party data, and they expect to get emails from you. So now you can be a lot more open with that user and send them a message that says, hey, how can we get you back, right? And that's ultimately what it comes down to. But it's really about making sure that you have different paths and you segment them properly. I think that makes it a lot more effective.
Yeah, I love that. I know we've done some stuff with clients in the past too, where we've done sort of emailing to people. We've matched them up right on the website and push them into Klaviyo or whatever email platform you want to use. That's the one we were using. But the important thing that we were kind of doing was making sure they hit specific engagement thresholds before we actually were engaging with them with an email, right? Like one strategy is anybody who lands on your site that you can identify, just send them the message, right? And just kind of hit them. But I think the most effective way to do that is, one, if you can match them up, great. Right? If they're already your client or customer, wonderful. That's easy. But if they're new and you still want to email them, make sure they've shown enough level of intent to not just be a browser, but actually shown interest in sort of crossing that line. And I found that to be the more effective way to sort of manage that. You can still get good return, good ROAS on that kind of engagement. And it's relatively an easy lift, in terms of benefiting that. But I mean, I think and then incorporating that into your cart recovery, into that process, just identifying who it is and where they're at in the process, and then hopefully delivering the right message at the right time. I think if you put those three things together, I think you'll have a better abandoned cart funnel, and hopefully close more purchases, more transactions a lot smoothly, and then that's at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to do, right? Is reduce the amount of friction that's occurring in your funnel. And the more data you have at your disposal, I think the more effective you can be within that process.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd lean back on one of the first things that I said, like, this is a huge opportunity. A lot of people look at it as a huge problem, but it's really a huge opportunity. And so you have to look at it that way, and you really have to figure out, okay, how do I leverage, what data do I need to leverage to, convert this opportunity into a return?
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's a great segue, because the next topic I really wanted to kind of talk about was, data itself, the balancing act with data, because one of the, I guess, core struggles, if you would, as talking with clients, and that is, excuse me, the brand, like we have so much data, it seems like. How do we balance it out and kind of cut through the noise and really get to the stuff that matters? And I think finding that balancing act is one of the challenges today in the data we have, or third-party data, or whatever we're bringing in. Like, how do we navigate that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think that everyone's first reaction, sort of their gut reaction, is to get as much data as they can. And that becomes really problematic, because the more data you have, the harder it is to figure out what data is providing the value, right? You get sort of this data overload, and it becomes difficult to work with, difficult to sort of define and clearly understand what data is providing the value, and it becomes really overwhelming. And a lot of people, their first gut is like, we want all the data we can get, and then they realize they're overwhelmed and they don't know what to do with it, and they don't know what's working. It becomes really problematic. So the first thing that the way that I look at it is figuring out what is your goal. Is the goal is this a cart abandonment problem? Is it a checkout abandonment problem? Like, what is this? Like, what are we trying to do here? And you're going to have multiple goals, right? I mean, you want to convert everybody, right? But figure out what's your first goal? Like, if my first goal is if somebody's going in my checkout, I almost had them and then I lost them. So maybe that's the first goal, right? We're one last, click away from getting them. So what do we got to do to get that one last click? And once you figure out what that initial goal is, then you can sort of analyze and figure out, okay, what data can we look at to try to achieve that goal? Okay. So if it's just that one thing, it's just that one last click. Okay. What could be stopping them from getting that last click? Right. So let's look at the people that didn't, that we lost in that last click. Let's compare them to the people that converted. See if we can find any differences. Were there engagement differences? Were there, was it, demographic differences? Whatever it is, let's figure out what data do we need to look at just to figure out the difference between those that did that last click and those that didn't. Once you solve that problem, maybe you find that data, you figure out exactly what you need to convert those, then you can go on to the next one and figure out what data you need for the next problem, but solve one problem at a time. That's really the crux of it.
No, I think it's so good. It reminds me of this quote. I think it was, at least it's attributed to Mark Twain. Who knows what you see quotes on the internet, but basically the quote goes, "Data is like garbage. You better know what you're going to do with it before you collect it." It's like you can get a lot of stuff, but unless you actually have a plan to use it, it really just starts to clutter and become more of a nuisance than an actual benefit. And I think that's really where these, owners, e-commerce stores, brands, they know they have this data. They know they need maybe more data. It's but coming up with the questions, right, to ask is the most important aspect. It's the same approach that I use when I'm talking about, say, Google Analytics. Google Analytics is a great tool for, your website. However, it's going to give you a lot of data. And this is true of any analytics platform. The bigger question is what is the actual thing that you need to solve for? What's the actual problem or question that you have? And then let the data, find the right source for that data and then ask those questions and see if you can get it right. But yeah, I mean, if you don't have a plan going into it, you just kind of get noise.
Yeah, for sure. And we've seen that time and again. We've seen people with just overwhelmed with data, and they're not able to solve their problem. And they're like, why can't we solve this problem? And we're like, well, what's your goal? Your goal can't be just to increase revenue. You got to figure out, everybody wants that.
Right.
How are you going to do that? Let's figure out where are the best places to start with that. And I think, I love your example where it's okay, well, if you got 20% of people that aren't going through the entire checkout process, well, let's grab those people. How do we get them converted? And if 10% of those are the people that aren't, that you're losing at checkout, and the other 10% are people that, whatever, that you lost some other, time during the process. Well, let's take it one piece at a time.
Yeah, no, I love it. So I think it's just a matter of sort of determining what your bigger questions are and then working backwards. And I think that's true of most important decisions that you're trying to do. It's what's the end goal? What's, Stephen Covey, have the end in mind, right? What am I trying to accomplish? And then figure out, well, what sources of data do I need to actually give me the information to create a plan of action, right? Because without action, I feel like data is not helpful, right?
Yeah. And I get
And
it.
so,
Sometimes you don't know what data you need, right? So you have to test. You
right,
have to figure that out. Sometimes you got to play around with it
yeah,
and figure it out first. But once you figure
for
out
sure,
what data you need, just concentrate on that. Like throw everything
yeah,
else away. You don't need everything else.
put on the
Just start.
blinders.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that.
Mhm.
That's awesome. So let's move on to our third topic, and that is sort of you're talking about being smart with the data, finding out what you need to do. Now, segmentation, like you have that data, you're learned about the customer, you have a little bit more information about them. Like, what's some tactics that we could be thinking about or using around segmentation just to let us do it more effectively and be smarter with the data that we are collecting and putting to use?
Yeah. I mean, this is like, this is what we're talking about. This is where the data comes into play, right? Um, and I think when you're talking about e-commerce, there's a lot of first-party data, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really great to be able to see what products your customers are buying, what they're engaging with, what's going on during the process, how engaged they are, all of that you talked about. But there's also this great opportunity, right, to enrich that data, because we had this conversation in the green room before we went live. A lot of times people think they know who their customer is, and once
Right.
they dig into and get some data enrichment
Sure.
and analyze who their customers are. You may have different customers for different products and so on and so on, but once you analyze that, at a product level or category level,
Mm-hmm.
and you see who your customers really are for those products and categories, you might be surprised.
Yep.
And that's where it gets really interesting, because when you learn that and you sort of see some of these surprises, it's an opportunity to improve your segmentation. It's an opportunity to be more thoughtful in your process when segmenting and targeting your customer. And I think that's the gold right there. Like that's where you can see significant
Mm-hmm.
improvements in your marketing efforts by really understanding who your customers are, at different levels, product levels, category levels, purchase levels. Who are your customers that consistently come back? Who are your customers that are buying high ticket items? Who are your customers that are buying specific products? Whatever it is, understanding all those different segments and being able to target them separately becomes really, really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it just allows you to hopefully understand your customer at a deeper level.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, the more understanding you have, the better, hopefully, you can communicate your value proposition or what is important to the customer in that segment, right? Because different segments of customers are going to have different varying degrees of requirements for a product
Mm-hmm.
or requirements of you of the brand. So to understand, as you think about it like think of it like an eco-friendly brand, whatever niche you're going to be in, right? You're going to have some segment of your customer group or your customer set that is going to be prioritizing the eco-friendliness of your product above anything else. Like that
Mm-hmm.
will be their primary decision driver, whether or not to be your customer or not, or go with a competitor. And so
Mm-hmm.
understanding that might be different than talking to someone who's much more interested in the actual function. It's like, does this actually, I mean, obviously it needs to work, whatever the product is, but maybe I'm more concerned about function or more concerned about price. And
Yeah.
so now you're sort of segmenting out your entire customer base based on, okay, what matters to them. Are they a values buyer? Are they like just a function buyer because you have a cool function that they like or want or need? Or is it just really a price sensitive
Yeah.
customer in your set? So you like understanding that allows you to also adjust your messaging accordingly, right? Because I would assume like with typically in my experience, if you're a much more value driven customer segment, the storytelling about the brand and the history and why your product does what you do and why your values of your brand are there matter more than, say, just a price sensitive shopper that just wants the product at, you know, the best price possible, right? Like they're gonna open your emails when you send them a discount code, not when you tell them a story about the brand. And so the question is, well, what's the most valuable to you as a brand? Like, who do you really want to work with? Do you want to build a community of like these passionate people who hold your values, which probably are going to have a higher lifetime value than someone who's just sort of looking for the cheapest and best deal possible? So that's where data gets real, right? And it gets segmented down and broken into actionable action steps in your marketing plan that allow you to kind of make gains. And that's cool.
Yeah, and the enrichment can reveal a lot of these things. Like you may have a segment of your customers that, even though you're an eco brand, like those, you may have a segment of your customers that really don't care about that. They just like the function, right? Or they just, you know, whatever, they like something about your product, whatever it is. You can learn that from your data enrichment, and you may find that you have a set of customers that, to your point, you don't need to give them a discount code. Like they're going to buy from you no matter what. So you're wasting and losing money by sending, you know, not segmenting them and sending them the discount code. There's going to be some customers that you will never get to convert unless you give them a discount code, but don't give it to everybody. Geez, you know, there's you, without a doubt, especially like an eco brand's a great example. There's people that may be very dedicated to your brand that you don't need to worry about that. They're like you because you're an eco brand. They like what you stand for. They're going to buy from you because of that. You know, that's you know, the segmentation and understanding all of these different types of things about your existing customers or future customers is really important from that perspective. Like, you understand how to market to each of them, and that you can market to each of them differently.
No, 100%. And I think it even goes back to the conversation we were having about like cart recovery. A lot of times I've seen brands within their cart recovery campaigns, right, just immediately offer like a discount code to somebody to try to capture that cart. But in reality, most of the time people just got distracted. Where I have every intention to, you know, like they got to take their kid to soccer practice or whatever, right? It's like, it's still open on my screen. I still have it in my cart. But then you send them a coupon code within like 2 hours or 4 hours later or 10 hours later. And they're like, oh yeah, sure, I'll take this coupon code now. They had every intention to buy it, but they were just kind of waiting it out to see if they could send them a coupon code. So like my recommendation is like, just send the reminder to people. And then maybe at the end, if it makes sense, now that also is influenced now by the segmentation data that you could pull into that, right? And the customer data that you'd have. Then maybe offer them the coupon code, right, to see if that gets pushed them online. But distinguishing between a new customer and a previous customer, right, is important because the new customer might need a discount code to kind of get them over that first purchase hurdle, right, to close the penny gap, if you would, right? There's I think a famous book on that where it's like, hey, if someone else doesn't spend at least a penny with you before they become a customer, going from free to that paid, the penny gap, and like they need a little bit of incentive to push you over that gap, as opposed to somebody who's maybe bought from you many times before and they're like, no, I love this product, I'm just coming back to buy it. I just need to I needed to be reminded that it was in my cart and that I needed to go take care of it, right? So I think applying that data to every aspect of your funnel becomes really, really important.
Yeah. And going back, I agree 100%. And going back to the whole segmentation thing in general, like I've seen some of the biggest brands make some of the simplest mistakes, like brands I've purchased from, and sending me emails that show that they clearly know nothing about me. You know, there was nothing targeted about that email. And it's like, clearly, not only did they not look at what I bought in the past, but they haven't enriched their data at all to get any idea about what I might buy in the future. And that to me is like a huge mistake. Like there's an opportunity, the data is there. You know, they had the data about what I bought. They could easily acquire the data about, you know, me in general. There's two opportunities there to improve on how they market to me, and they miss them. And I've seen that happen time and again.
if only there was a really cool, easy solution to make that happen for e-commerce.
Yeah, I know what you're hinting at. And so we'll get there.
We will.
The hint I'll say is that we've got a product launch on the way that will help make things a lot easier in that space. So
absolutely. And that's it's honestly one of the challenges I think that e-commerce brands face is like, there are definitely players in this space that can do enrichment, right, of their data, but nobody who really makes it super easy that I found. That just makes it as simple as possible and can really just integrate beautifully into it. So I think that there's opportunity there to help brands enrich their data more effectively, to give a better, because at the end of the day, enrichment, in my perspective, from a marketer, from a brand, from a, just an overall consumer, is I want you to give me better messaging when I want it and need it, not just blast it out to me, right? Like give me the right message when I need it. And that data enrichment helps you to determine that. It really helps you to kind of understand your customer more effectively. And that is where I think the magic starts to happen with it. And it allows you to kind of see, to see the forest through the trees, if you would, like to really actually get a much clearer picture who you're dealing with and who your customer segments are. And that's when I think you can start seeing 15-20% lifts of just maximizing what your current customer database is. So I think that's the beautiful part about like enrichment and segmentation, is that you will get lifts if you do it correctly. If your data is good and you implement the correct strategies for it, you 100% I've seen get lifts along that order of magnitude, right? You'll see improvement, and then it just stacks from there, right? So it's good stuff. And so really it's about getting, I think, brands access to that data as cost efficiently as possible, and then simplifying their decision-making process with it. And I think that is what I'm excited to see kind of get rolled out.
Stay tuned, people.
Absolutely.
Kyle and I will be promoting something that will solve these problems soon.
Yes, I am very pumped about it. Awesome. Well, with that, I think we tackled everything. I guess, is there any questions that anybody has about data? Sure, we could pop those up potentially. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to the comments section. Nothing specific. Perfect. Awesome. Well, let's call it an evening. I appreciate your time, David. This is great stuff. This is the work that isn't necessarily like, think about like ads or marketing. The data isn't the sexiest piece of this aspect, but it's the foundation and the like the building blocks to long-term success and growth and profitability, right? Like your margin, I think, is really built in your data, and your mastery of that data. You think about it as like, oh, I just lower my customer acquisition costs. No, like the value is in your customer that you already own. Like that's where lifetime value gets unlocked. That's where profitability gets unlocked. So, margin is in the data. And so that is where you need to kind of spend like to I think you mentioned this before. It's like, I've seen a lot of brands make a lot of mistakes, especially with their own customer base. That's because I feel like the most of the brands that I've seen spend 90%, maybe 80% of their time focused on new customer acquisition.
Yeah.
And it's almost where it's like you get better results if you flip that somewhat. I mean, maybe 80% on your current customer base is maybe a little too aggressive, but even if you went 60-40 and you're 60% on new customer acquisition and 40% on really like understanding who your customer is and really getting to give them the most relevant offer at the best time, then that shift in focus, I think, would unlock a lot more. So with that
could be the number one missed opportunity that people don't
agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. And I think it really, in order to do that, you really have to have a good set of data and enriched data. I think, that goes beyond, just the clarity of like first party data. It's like, that's going to be the stuff that you see on your, that's your sales data, that's your initial customer. But there's third party stuff like with BDEX offers that allows you to just augment that so much more and provide that context around it that you just don't have with first party data. So that's really where the magic, I think the magic is seen in kind of like the good stuff lies. And so, yeah, I'm excited to be talking more about this again soon. So with that, for those of you who want to stay connected with us, follow us at OmniRocket. Yeah, LinkedIn. You'll see the link here in the notes or in the comments as well. But check it out. And if you need anything, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn as well. Message me, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to walk you through sort of strategies for using this data to drive bigger and better e-commerce sales and brand sales for you. So with that, David, thanks again for jumping on. It was a blast, and it was good stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Have a great night.